In this video, we're going to go ahead and install the MySQL database server on a Windows machine. If you're not running Windows, move on to the next video or the one after that where I'll show you how to do the same thing but on a Mac or a Linux computer. But if you're using Windows, you're in the right place, so let's continue. The first thing we want to do is go to the website dev.mysql.com. You may get a pop-up about accepting cookies, so do whatever you normally do when you get that pop-up. The download will work fine if you decide to decline all cookies. Okay, once we get here, I'm going to click the Downloads link. I'll scroll down to towards the bottom and click MySQL Community GPL Downloads and click that. We want the MySQL installer for Windows link, so click that. On the next screen, Microsoft Windows should already be selected. Below that, we have two choices. Both choices will install the same version, and if you have a connection to the internet, then it's not really important which one you choose. The first one, the MySQL Installer Web Community one, will start the installation and then download most of the files it needs while it's installing. You'd use it if you want to install MySQL on the computer that you're using to download, which is what we're doing at the moment. But you might want to install the program on several computers or on a computer that doesn't have internet access. In that case, you can choose the second option and download the entire installer. As you can see, that's a larger initial download. Before we decide which one to use, notice that there's an information tab on that screen, the blue information icon. Click that to get a bit more information about the installer choices we have. There's a brief description of what the installer includes, the latest version of the MySQL server itself, MySQL Workbench, which we use to interact with the server, and some sample databases and documentation. Below that, there's a note about choosing the right file. That pretty much echoes what I've just said about the two options. The note is interesting. MySQL installer is 32-bit, but will install both 32-bit and 64-bit binaries. In a minute, I'm going to show you how to select that when we go through the installation process. So you'll need to know whether your Windows computer is running a 32 or 64-bit version of Windows. And you can generally find that in the control panel for Windows 10 or earlier. If on Windows 11, which I'm going to Settings, type About in the search box, then click About your PC. And depending on your version of Windows, it will tell you System Type 64-bit operating system. We're not so much concerned about the processor because it is possible to have a 32-bit version of Windows running on a 64-bit processor. We're interested in this bit here, the 64-bit operating system. You'll need to know whether you're running the 32 or 64-bit version. We've just seen how to check that information on Windows 10 and 11. If you're running an older version of Windows, you can generally find that in the System part of Control Panel. There will be a screen similar to this where you can find out which version of Windows you're running and whether it's a 32 or 64-bit edition. And again, we'll need that when we get to the stage of installing MySQL. Okay, back in my browser, click the General Availability GA Releases tab to get back to the choice of installers. I suggest you just grab the full product, the second option, because you can reinstall it if you need to without having to download again. I'm going to choose the second one, so click its download link. Now it's asking whether we want to set up an Oracle web account because Oracle now own the MySQL product. If you already have an account, you can log in. We're going to click on No Thanks, just start my download, then click Save File if it doesn't start downloading automatically. Now we need to open the file that we've downloaded, so I'm just going to select Open File here. If you're using a different browser, do whatever you'd normally do to open a file that you've downloaded. The installer starts, and I'll give that a moment. Click on Yes if it pops up to allow this app to make changes to your device, and the installation should proceed. It may pop up again and ask you to allow this app to make changes again. If you get an option to apply an upgrade, click Yes to allow the upgrade to be applied as well. And now we get this screen where we can choose the setup type. There are various radio buttons here to the left and to the right. It gives you a description of what it's actually going to install. So you can see we have a number of options. You've got a server only. This installs only the MySQL server, which would be useful if you want to run the server on a different computer rather than on your development machine. we've got a client-only option, which is a sort of complement to the server-only option. This is the one we'd install on our development and user computers if the server was running on another computer. We've got a full option, which installs everything. But the option we're going to select is the custom option, so that we're installing only the things that we need for this course. I'm going to click on custom, and I'm going to click on next. Once we've done that, we get this screen here. On the left-hand side, there's a list of available products, and the right-hand side shows a list of the products that are to be installed. Currently, that's empty because we haven't selected anything yet. So I'm going to come over here first and expand MySQL servers by clicking on the plus. Do the same to expand MySQL server, then again to expand the latest version, which for me is version 8.0. You may have a later version there, and that's fine. Install whatever is the latest version available. For me, at the time I'm recording this video, that's version 8.0. You can see there are older versions I can choose, but don't do that. Go with the latest version. In fact, after expanding that, we can see version 8.0. You can see a lot of other versions like 8.0. Just choose the latest version you see. The x64 at the end indicates that this is a 64-bit version. If you see x86 there, then you'll be installing the 32-bit version. You've already checked whether your operating system is 32-bit or 64-bit, so make sure that you choose the appropriate version for your operating system. I mention that because earlier versions of the installer used to show both the 32-bit and the 64-bit versions here. The installer changes whenever there's a new version, and Oracle might decide to show both versions again in the future. So if they do, choose the x64 version on a 64-bit version of Windows and the x86 version on a 32-bit version of Windows. I'm running a 64-bit version of Windows, so I'll select the x64 version, the only one that's showing here, then click on the arrow to move it across to the right-hand side. So that's now going to be installed. The next thing we want to do is come over here to Applications and click on the plus again to expand it. Expand MySQL Workbench by clicking on the plus, then again to expand MySQL Workbench 8.0 x64. Once again, you may have to choose x64 or x86 if those options appear for you. So I'm going to select the MySQL Workbench 8.0 x64 and click the arrow to move that over to the right-hand side. I'll ignore all the older versions. Once again, the version numbers may change in the future. In fact, the MySQL Server and Workbench programs might even have different version numbers. That's fine, they're often the same, but one program might be updated separately to the other. Depending on when you're watching this video, they might be a later version, but the principle is still the same. Just select the relevant version and select the 64-bit or 32-bit version if that option is available. At this point, we've selected the only two products we need, so I'm going to click on Next, and then I'm going to click on Execute. This is going to start out downloading the MySQL software first. And after that, we will start the installation of both those products onto this computer. And once that's finished, we need to go through a configuration step to set up usernames and so on and so forth. Okay, so it's now finished downloading. I'm going to click on Next and Execute to install. Now the install is complete, it's time to configure. I'll click Next again. That will bring up the configuration options. And we've got a config type drop down here where we can select various different options. We're going to leave the default of development computer since that's exactly what we're doing here. We're using MySQL as developers. It shouldn't normally be necessary to change any other options here. The defaults will work for most computers. Now in terms of the port, it needs to be a unique port number that's not used anywhere else, or it's not used for another application on this computer. The 3306 will be fine for my computer. Normally, that will work for your computer as well. The rest of the defaults are okay. You don't need to change anything else there. Click on Next. Now we get to specify the authentication method. You shouldn't normally change this. We want strong password encryption that keeps our installation secure. If you've already written MySQL applications and they can't be updated, then you can specify the old style authentication here. but we're starting from scratch and don't have any existing applications to support. So we won't change anything here, just click Next. Now it's asking for what the root password is. Now the root account is created automatically by MySQL. It is a logon that is the most powerful user in the system. And generally speaking, it's good to use that username and password very sparingly, only when you really need to do some sort of super administrative tasks. So what we're going to do is assign a password for it, which we need to do, but then we're going to create a new user that we're going to be using for our day-to-day use of MySQL. So you want to enter a password that's hard to guess and is quite secure. So I'm going to type in a password, then confirm it by typing it in again. The password strength is showing as strong, so that's good. Okay, that's the root user. As I said, you'd only log in as this user when you need to do administrative tasks. It's not a good idea to use such a powerful login for normal use. So the next thing we need to do is click on Add User. We're going to create another user that we're going to be using for the normal tasks in this course. Type in the name of the user. I'm going to call this one dev user, all one word, but you can call it literally whatever you like. This is the user that will log in as when we're working with our databases. For the host, I'm going to change that to localhost using the drop-down arrow. Localhost means this computer, so that ensures that it can only be used locally. That's more secure because we only want to be using this username locally. We don't want access from any external source. Some students have reported that they don't get localhost here. Instead, they see the IP address 127.0. That's fine. That's the IP address that localhost resolves to, so choose that address if that's what you see here. We're going to leave the role set to DB administration. There's other options you can choose here, but I'm not going to change any of that. I'm going to leave it on admin for now. The database administrator can do things like creating databases and tables, which is what we'll want to do in this course. And we also need to enter a password for this. I suggest you make this password different to the root user. And make sure you remember both passwords. I'm going to enter my dev user password, then confirm it. In this case, you can see again, I've got a strong password. So now we're done with that, click OK, then Next. The next step is to configure the Windows service. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about this. You can generally accept the defaults on this screen. I will mention that start the MySQL server at system startup checkbox. If you'll be doing a lot of work with MySQL, then you'll probably want to leave that ticked. But if your computer is low on memory or is quite old and slow, then you should untick that box. In a moment, I'll show you what it does and how you can start and stop the service manually. So we're going to accept all the defaults and click on Next. Leave everything unchanged on the server file permissions dialog and click Next again. We've now configured everything, and this screen just gives us a chance to go back if we decide we want to change something. We don't, so click Execute. The installer runs through the process of configuring MySQL on this computer. When it's finished, click on Finish. Click on Next, and you can see we're now done. The installation procedure has been completed. Leave the checkbox to start MySQL Workbench after setup ticked. And that's because we want to run the workbench just to confirm the installation is okay. So click on Finish. Before we move on, I'm going to close the browser down. Okay, what I'd like to do next is show you what that Start the MySQL server at system startup checkbox does, what effect it has, and what you can do if you decided not to tick it. We want to go into the services on our computer, and Microsoft moved that option around on different versions of Windows. The way that will work on all current versions is to use the Windows key and R, then type services.msc into the run box. Press Enter, and the Services Management console starts up. And once you've done that, you want to scroll on down here until we get to MySQL. The services usually appear in alphabetical order, and the name we're looking for is the one we used when configuring the service. We didn't change the default, so for me, it's called MySQL 80 because I installed version 8.0. Your name might be slightly different, but you should be able to find your MySQL service in the list. and there's MySQL 80. And you can see in this case, it's actually running and the startup type is set to automatic. That's a good sign. The fact that it's running tells us that the MySQL service has been successfully installed and is actually running. That checkbox that we ticked causes the startup type to be automatic. You can override this if your computer is low on resources. If you haven't got a lot of memory, you can change this. So instead of it starting automatically every time your computer starts, you can right-click that and go into Properties, and you could make that manual and click on OK. And what that would mean is it won't start automatically each time you turn the computer on. So you could start the computer, and if you decide you're doing some development in this course, you could just come over to here, right-click, and click on Start. And that would start the service for that particular session. In my case, I'm happy to have this run automatically. I've got enough resources, so I'm going to right-click again, go into Properties, and choose Automatic. So that every time I reboot the computer, MySQL is available for me. We've confirmed that's running OK, so close the services down. All right. Getting back now to the MySQL workbench that started automatically once MySQL was installed. I want to start by clicking on this local instance, so click on that, and it brings up this little screen. It's asking for the root user password, so I'm going to type in that root password that I set earlier in the video, and I'm going to choose not to save it. You could choose to save the password if you like, but for security reasons I prefer not to do that. Click on OK. And this has opened up, which is a good sign that we got the password correct. If we come over here on the left and click on Server Status, that gives us a bit of an overview of our MySQL service. A lot of the information is hidden by that right-hand pane, so click the rightmost button above it. You can see we've got 3 panes here, and each of those buttons corresponds to one of the panes. The rightmost one has a blue bar on its right-hand side. That shows that it represents the right-hand pane, and clicking it will toggle that right-hand pane on and off. When we remove that pane, we can see the graphical stats about our server. It's running, as you can see here, so that's good. We can also see the number of connections and other statistics. But obviously, there won't be a lot happening at the moment, and that's because we haven't really started using it yet. But bear in mind that we have actually connected to the server because we've used MySQL Workbench to do that, in case you're wondering where the connections are coming from. Okay, come over here on the left and click on Users and Privileges. We can see the list of users, so you can see there that we had the root account, which was automatically created for us, and also the dev user account that we created. You might see a few other users which are used internally by MySQL. If you don't see them, don't worry, sometimes the default settings are changed and these accounts don't show up. That's fine, they're not accounts that we need to do anything with, and it's best that we don't make any changes to them. The account that we'll be using, most of the time, is this dev user account. We want to be able to create new databases and perform all the other database-related tasks that we're going to learn about. That means we have to give this account the necessary access. Select Dev User on the left, then click the Administrative Roles tab. You have full control over the level of access that you can grant to users, but it's often easier to use these roles that have already been created. For example, there's a user admin role that can create users, but can't alter databases, and there's a DB manager role that can manage databases, but doesn't have the access needed to create or modify users. We will want to perform all tasks, so click the top option, DBA, to make Dev User a database administrator. We'll be able to perform all tasks when we log in as Dev User. If you make any changes here, make sure you click Apply to apply the change, otherwise the access rights won't be granted. All right. So click on View Now, and from the View menu select Home. We go back to where we were. Now we're going to come over here and click on this little wrench to the right of the plus sign, which is for managing connections. That should open up this Manage Server Connection screen here, as you can see. So I'm going to click on this local instance MySQL 80, and we're going to click the Test Connection button at the bottom right. If it wants a password, that root password, again, then type it in. And you can see that we've successfully made the MySQL connection. So that tells us that MySQL is working correctly and we're able to connect to the database. So that's OK. I'm going to click on OK. All right. Now let's click on the new button over on the left. This time we're going to add a new connection. We're going to add a new connection for what we're going to be using in this course. For the connection name, I'm just going to call it development, but you can call it whatever you like. And we're going to change the username. Instead of root, we're going to change that to the username we created, which was devuser. Then I'm going to click on test connection to make sure we can connect as our development user. We'll be asked for the password, so enter your devuser password this time. Remembering that this isn't the root user, this is the other user. Click on OK, and you can see we made a successful connection. So that tells us that the username and password are valid and we're good to go. So click on OK, close this screen, and we've now got this second connection configured under the MySQL connections. We're going to be able to use that in the course. I'm going to finish the video here. Now we're actually done. In the next video, as I mentioned at the start, it's a video for Mac users. So if you've just installed this on Windows and you haven't got a Mac or a Linux machine, you can skip the next 1 or 2 videos and move on to the video after that, where we start working with this MySQL instance that we've just installed and configured. I'll see you in that next video.